Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Denzel Curry, called TABOO. So I always tend to get a flurry of comments whenever I cover trap music or SoundCloud rap that it's not intended to be lyrical or deep. It's just looking to be flashy and brutal and direct, relying more on sheer raw power or its presentation to really stick the landing. And well, of course there's some truth to that. My counter-argument is, well, you can have both, you know, as there is such a thing as visceral, hard-hitting hip-hop that can also be fiercely lyrical. Kendrick Lamar, Doomtree, Run the Jewels, Sage Francis, Death Grips, etc. Now, the counter-argument to this is that, well, they're often too underground, they're too conceptual, they're too weird. What about easier subject matter? And then I point at Schoolboy Q, J.Rock, Styles P, Freddie Gibbs, and you all get my point. But then you get the feeble defenses, well, they're older, they're more traditionalist in hip-hop, I just can't relate, I'm too young for that. So then I point at Brockhampton, and that does tend to work. But then you get the charmers who get put off by the gay content, and they argue how they just want a new MC that appeals to pure trap rage for teenage white boys to live out their fantasy. Cause it's always teenage white boys. And while my natural inclination is to be kind of dismissive and vaguely contemptuous, too late. But my other response is to point at Denzel Curry and say, are you happy now? More often than not, their answer is no, because they want me to validate their SoundCloud waifus and make me think they should really reconsider Brockhampton there, given some of those inclinations. But I honestly think Denzel Curry hits a really damn satisfying middle ground for the both of us, especially coming off of his 2016 project Imperial. Explosively melodic production, bellicose but well-structured flows, and a sort of layered, self-flagellating content that unfortunately saw a lot of people dismiss his material as kind of shallow, but revealed significant depth in between the lines. There's a lot going on, and he's a lot smarter than people gave him credit. Now, my perennial issue with Denzel Curry has kind of been on the production side, but when I heard that TABOO, the album had complete with all that edgy spelling, it had opted for even more abrasive and explosive production, I was definitely curious, especially as the noisier side of experimental hip-hop is still relatively uncharted ground besides JPEG Mafia, who's on this album, and Death Grips, and then blowing out your subwoofer. So, alright, what do we get from Denzel Curry on TABOO? So this is one of those projects where I keep thinking I should like this a lot more than I actually do. Because it seems like it's doing a lot of what I wanted Denzel Curry to do coming off of Imperial. The production is more varied, as are Denzel Curry's delivery, his hooks are more sticky than ever, and yet his trademark intensity and brutality is more prominent than ever, forming a contrast that's sharper than ever before, and from his melodic flair to his more guttural shouts. But the more listens I gave TABOO, and outside of thinking that some critics really need a broader vocabulary of reference points when it comes to Denzel Curry's brand of hip-hop, the less I was completely convinced that it worked all the way through. Hell, in terms of its progression, what it reminded me most of was All-American Badass by Joey Badass from last year. But where that record grounded its more accessible and melodic flourishes and mid-90s hip-hop tones in a fully formed social conscience, TABOO kind of spirals into twisted bleakness and nihilism that seems to pull from previous Denzel Curry projects and head into more personal territory, but then miss some of the deeper shades of nuance that made Imperial so damn compelling. So yes, it really is damn good, but I don't quite think it's great. I know you're gonna hate me for saying it, but again, pinning down why this is kind of tricky for me, because with every banger here, Denzel Curry only sounds better than ever. Yeah, it can be kind of jarring when he's throwing in references to Pokemon, Jimmy Neutron, and Katy Perry with his most guttural and vicious bars to date. It just kind of feels tonally dissonant, and this has been an issue going back to Nostalgia 64. And if there is a rapper who could afford to take a breath and maybe indulge some subtlety for contrast, it is Denzel Curry. But you can tell that he's convinced that if he brings enough raw charisma, complex flows, and huge hooks, the majority of people won't notice the details that don't quite fit. Which, probably true, and okay, if that's the parallel to Yeezus that some critics are unfortunately making, I might be able to see it. But Denzel Curry's brand of darkness is very different than what Kanye tried. More familiar with splitting the difference between Death Grips-esque experimentation and nihilism, and the mainstream tempered with the brutality that comes with street-level knowledge. And in comparison with many of his peers in this lane, and Kanye for that matter, Denzel Curry can actually rap his ass off, splitting the difference between staccato bluntness, more melodic sing sing rapping, and a commitment to more traditional bars where the reference points are pretty straightforward but consistently well structured on a technical level, and he's got punchlines that go on for days, and he's got a sense of humor. But I'm sure some of you were intrigued by that reference I made earlier in the review to Joey Badass, especially as All-American Badass was easily one of the best records that came out in 2017. Yes, I stand by that opinion. Well, beyond the increased reliance on melodic singing and a renewed focus on balancing accessibility with actual bars, there's a bit of a thematic parallel as well, as both records begin with a relative lightness of tone before descending past a smokier gray zone to pitch black darkness. Now, the most notable difference is there, where most of Joey Badass's focus was outwards on the larger world around him and largely aspirational, there's a more pronounced sense of damaged nihilism and a personal focus that pervades even the brighter songs of TABOO, with the consistent early callback being towards the movie It with black balloons, reflecting neglected outsiders finding some form of camaraderie amidst their trauma. But even against that solace, it can be denied when his work is going to give him success, which flips the typical more money, more problems content into something that's actually a little bit different, as Denzel Curry doesn't seem to feel all that comfortable celebrating a success that further isolates him from his friends and his neighborhood. Hell, on songs like Super Saiyan Superman, it's almost buried, but it's kind of telling he's still with that same girl. It's all throughout the rest of the album. He's not making steal your girl bars. It's more just defiantly crushing you in terms of the weight of his lyricism. But amidst his paranoia in the face of betrayal, possible bipolar disorder, and unresolved grief in the face of his brother's death at the hands of police, his own success seems to push him even further off the rails, especially as he hits the stark realization of systems and environments that are not only reinforcing that systemic trauma for him, but actively want to revel in it or push him to extremes while never really changing to help those who are caught in their mix that need help. With the parallel being to Kurt Cobain on Cloud Cobain kind of being on the nose, but he's not wrong. And thus it makes a sick sort of sense that this record ends in some of the darkest places that Denzel Curry has ever trod. And while he still has naked contempt for rappers who cannot rise to his level of wordplay, there's still a sadomasochistic death wish in how he plainly knows what image will win over the suburban teenage white boys who will never grasp the deeper, dark roots of his reality, which might not be helped by Denzel Curry making it all feel so damn anthemic in his bangers, where some will not be able to get past the presentation, they'll just take it as it is on the surface. But Denzel Curry is putting it in the text here, and the interpretation of the twisted spiral of nihilism that leads to black metal terrorists does feel like a natural extension of the subversive side that he brought to Imperial. It makes sense he goes to this territory. So why the hell don't I like it more? Well, believe it or not, it might be coming back to the production, which paradoxically at the brightest and the darkest moments really works for me, but in the middle can hit a bit of a weird gray zone. The lingering guitars and the thick bass of TABOO that lead into the sweet mid-90s bass groove of Black Balloons, it's phenomenal. Starts off the album really strong for me, but then we get the slightly more garish synth leads of Cash Maniac, the lumpy trap touches, and it feels like a depressingly conventional song for a rapper like Denzel Curry, especially recruiting singers like Nigeria and later with Billie Eilish for hooks, even if I really do like a lot of the conscious content from both Denzel Curry and J.I.D on Sirens, even with that grainy clicking noise that runs over a lot of the bass melody. But really, the choice of these oily, desaturated synth leads, it goes back to Nostalgia 64, and Ira isn't really a fan of them there either. And even with the more distorted vocal pickups and the dirtier reverb or the clunkier bass saturating a fair few of these songs, they don't quite have the texture or distinctive catchiness that redeem the best cuts coming off of Imperial. And that does get a bit bothersome, for as much as Denzel Curry might denigrate some mainstream SoundCloud MCs for not forging their own way or experimentation, the triplet flows, they do creep in, and some of the more distorted moments do show hallmarks of what's become SoundCloud rap. Now that said, when this record tilts into its darkest and most abrasive moments, from the minimalism of Blackest Balloons to the more alien synth leads of PERCS, to getting JPEG Mafia and Zillakami for the off-kilter and really quite twisted Vengeance, I started to really get into it, until you realize that Vengeance is going to pivot into acoustic guitar instead of descending into the nightmare fuel you might be expecting. Or even that when you get legit-ass death metal growls on Black Metal Terrorists, kind of a little discombobulating there if you know your metal, but the song never quite gets as graphic or crushing as it could. Mostly against that oddly squeaky hook. Yeah, it's probably close to Death Grips as the album's ever gonna get. You can tell that Denzel Curry gets the vibe a lot better than Kanye ever did, but it still feels a shade too clean to really emphasize the abrasive noise that would truly put Denzel Curry in really experimental territory. It's close, for sure, but the punch almost feels like it was pulled a little bit. Now, all that being said, I'm still really liking this album. I'm inclined to say it is on the cusp of greatness, but I'd be lying to say that it got all the way there, at least for me. And it's frustrating for me to say that because Denzel Curry is a great rapper with a lot more nuance than he's often given credit, and his talent for hooks here is undeniable. This thing is catchy as hell. But at the same time, for the emotional arc he's putting out there are some production and word choices that he made that seem to compromise the overall tone and take me out of it a little bit. It got distracting, especially when considering the album as a whole. He is leaps and bounds ahead of so many in the SoundCloud scene. So when I give this an extremely strong 7 out of 10, the recommendation most comes for those who are looking for something that's got a considerable grade above the 6'9" ilk, a little bit more brains and brawn behind it. And hey, I still think Denzel Curry's got the sort of versatility and capacity for real greatness. Imperial's still probably the high watermark for me, and he's in his early 20s, so I'm definitely looking forward to where he goes from here. In the meantime, yeah, check it out. Solid stuff. Not quite great, but he'll get there. I believe it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'm more than grateful. Yeah, I know some of you guys are going to be a little down on me that I'm not quite entirely on board, but he's so close. He's so close to getting there, and I think he will get there in the future. But if you want to buy the record, links down there below, and I got the poll up there. I'm curious where you guys are going to fall on this one, because again, I think this album's getting a lot of hype from some quarters, and that's really impressive to see. I'm excited about that. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there. If you want to check out my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.